This is the last video that I will be making before a whole bunch of other videos start coming up on my making process of my historical gown and my commercial pattern gown, the designs of which you can see behind me. But yeah, so this video is just going to be sort of a wrap-up of what my proposal was. So the video is going to talk, and apologies, my notes are right in front of me, and there is a lot, and I want to make sure I'm hitting every single point. So if you see me look down, I'm looking at my notes. So this video is an in-depth talk about my methodology, so why I'm doing it, my practice methods that I'm going to be using for both of the dresses that I make, and the finances and the time management side of things, so how much everything cost, what the budget was, and what my plan of action is for the rest of the time that I have, because I have until a certain deadline to get everything done, and then development of my project as a whole, so how everything's going, what went good, what went bad, and sort of just the whole process of how I'm going to document that side of things. So first I want to state what my intentions are with this project. So this dissertation is a practice dissertation, and like I said, my methodology, my reasoning for doing this is I want this to be a teaching experience for people who don't necessarily know what the historical side of costuming is or what historical dress is. So this dissertation should be used as a teaching tool for people to understand the inaccuracies of historical dress in commercial patterns, and how we can go about teaching people the actual correctness of period dress and historical costumes. And to show that, that's why I'm making two different dresses. One that shows historical accuracy to its finest. Nothing can ever be 100% accurate, but showing it to a high degree of what I believe it should have been done, and then the other being a commercial pattern of what commercial patterns think of as historical dress versus what it actually was. So there's the comparison between how the pattern pieces are made, how they want you to sew it, how they have the interlinings put in, what's the interlining, what's the fabrics they want you to use. All of that is discussed. So like I said, two dresses constructed. The one that I'm doing my historical practice and my historical research on will be an experimental archaeological approach, and the definition of that, because most people are wondering what experimental archaeology is. So this is the definition from Wikipedia, as well as very similar definitions are out there as well. So the definition: experimental archaeology, also called experiment archaeology, is a field of study which attempts to generate and test archaeological hypotheses, usually by replacing or approximating the feasibility of ancient cultures performing various tasks and feats. End quote. This approach is how I'm going to be constructing the historical dress, because I have no idea how they actually constructed things. We know they had sewing machines, as stated, as clearly right there. This is a 1900 machine that I'm using for my dissertation. And we have manuals and manuscripts and patterns, but we don't know how they were made. We don't know how they would have gone about sewing it, whether they would have done, one seam first versus the other, or if they would have done it the other way around. We don't really get that. So I have an accurate, authentic sewing machine, so I can get the stitch lengths from this machine, how they would have been done on other dresses of that time period. I have dressmakers books dated to the early 1900s, Margaret J. Blair's books on sewing and garment cutting for home is what I'm using mostly for sewing techniques and taking measurements of the undergarments. And like I said, what I don't have is how they actually made the garments. So, we know as historical costumers, and I know that they wore corsets, and I have a corset, but we don't know how it was made. We don't know if there was a special machine. We don't know if anything. So experimenting, stating that, well, if I do this, I should get this. That's my hypothesis. If I make this corset this way, I generally will believe that it should do the thing it needs to do. And you do it, and if it doesn't do the thing, you found out that, okay, it had to have been created differently. So I will be using my sewing knowledge to the best of my abilities and guess how the Edwardians of the 1900s to about 1905, which is the dress that I'm making, went about sewing up their clothes. Things get a little differently when we get onto the commercial dress, because that dress is already set in stone for how it wants to be made. The pattern tells you, sew it up this way, put a dart here, sew this seam with a French seam. So it's telling me how to do it, so it's not really experimental archaeology for the historical side. It's they're putting the utmost faith in their pattern to say, yeah, if you do it this way, this will get you the correct shape. When in reality, it doesn't, they're not really doing all the research that needs to be done. In my unbiased opinion, the dress is going to have faults. There's going to be things that are not historically accurate. There's going to be things that just don't look right about it because they didn't do enough research. They may have looked at fashion plates and other garments that had similar aspects, but they didn't actually sit down with the actual garment, take the pattern from the garment, and put that onto paper. They just are looking at images, maybe doing other research, I don't know. But the overall effect just doesn't look authentic. It looks costumey. And what I mean by costumey is that it doesn't look like it's actually from that time period to a historical costumer's eye. It looks like you took reference, but you took a lot of liberties in how to make it because you're mass marketing it to a vast audience. With that now out of the way, I'm going to go on to my documentation process and how I'm going to do that, which you kind of can tell, I'm doing videos. With doing this project and like I said, you know what I'm doing with it, you know how I'm going to, try to correlate costume versus historical dress. But now it's like, how am I going to document the process? Well, I'm doing YouTube videos. So each garment piece that I'm making will have its own separate YouTube video. So the bust bodice, the corset, the petticoat, the chemise, the combinations, or whatever I'm making will have its own video. So with making the historical dress, there's about 10 pieces. Each video will consist of that piece alone. And then there might be one video that ties all the undergarments together, and then one video that ties all the overgarments together, the fashion garments, and then one video that combines them all together, which is the final video in the process. Reading my notes. The undergarments have to be first, and then the outer layers have to be made last, so that's where a lot of the time and time management comes into play, which I will talk about in just a minute. Because there's so many pieces to that, I've already started, and I have a head start on that, and I'll talk about time management in just a moment. But with the commercial dress, there's only 2 pieces. It's not going to take that long, and documenting that is going to be a lot easier because, like I said, the pattern tells me how to do it, so I don't have to really document, well, if I do this, then this should work, and I have to puzzle it out, and I have to, figure out, well, how am I going to do this? I don't have to do multiple fittings. I can just go in, make it, and the video of documenting that will be me, I don't want to say critiquing, but it's going to be more critiquing the pattern, being just like, I don't know why they have me do this. I'm going to do it because that's what I'm trying to show is if you do it this way, they trust that it's going to just do the thing. And my eyes knowing what accident garments look like are going to be shooting the other direction, be just like, no, don't do it that way. So documenting that is going to be easy, but also a little bit tricky because I'm going to have to force myself to follow that pattern, which is good because it's a learning experience to show people this is not a wrong way, but there's always a different way to do things. There's always a more efficient way, not to say that that way is the more prominent way to do it. You're just going to get a different result that you might like better. So once finished, I plan on getting both qualitative and quantitative data by using social media. Social media is a great platform. I'm using mostly Facebook because I'm a part of 2 groups. I'm a part of the 19th Century Costuming group, which mainly focuses on 19th century and some Edwardian stuff. But for the most part, it's 1860s to about 1890s is what that group focuses on. And the other group that I'm also a part of is the Costume Network group, and they focus more on like the cosplay, the costuming, the costume changes, the theatrical side of things. So seeing what both sides look at and how they react is going to be something that I'm really excited about, because I can post them both, have similar questions, and, you know, the qualitative data that I want to get is the comments, which sort of feeds into quantitative, but the qualitative data is how are they commenting? Are they commenting with simple things like, this is beautiful, to, you know, I want them to comment questions and sort of query what I'm doing, because I'm not saying that I'm the best. I'm not saying that my work is 100% accurate and that's what they did. I want people to have, you know, civil arguments, but arguments nonetheless being just like, well, why'd you do it this way? Because if you did it this way, this would have happened. But if you did this way, and having the whole community get together and then commenting on this to see what other people think of it. Qualitative data is likes. How many times has it been shared? Has it gone viral? What do people like? Because one thing in one group might not translate to another group. Because I posted already the corset for the historical dress in both pages. In 2 days, I had over 200 likes and already 10, 15 comments on the historical dress, but then I posted in the Costuming Network, I only have 100, I have under 200 likes, and it's been 2 weeks. So that's just something to see what people react to. It's interesting. And then also coming up with questions, because there are a few questions I would like to ask. I need to go more in depth on how I want to ask these questions, because I don't want to just say, which do you like better? Or which is historically accurate and which isn't? Because those are pretty much, you know, apples and oranges. Like, you're going to get people saying both things. I want questions to be specific towards one dress and then specific towards another, and then one that can combine both of them together. So that way I'm getting multiple answers on what people think of both dresses, and taking the bias and trying to take as much bias out as possible of those questions. So that way it's not all geared towards historical costumers or geared towards cosplayers. With that out all of the way, for figuring out documentation and how I'm going to get my data, I am going to tell you about my financing and my budget and my time management before I end this video. But alas, I do not have time to tell you about my finances and my time management, because I only get 15 minutes, and this is actually taking a lot longer than I thought it was, because I have a lot to say. So I think what's going to happen is this is going to be another two-parter. I hate doing two-parters, but because I'm not using YouTube as my job, I'm using it as recreation, just to get information out there, and mostly for my dissertation at the moment. This is going to be 2 parts, so apologies for having this be in 2 parts, Tony, and anyone else who's going to be peer reviewing this and giving me my mark on it, but it's going to have to be 2 parts. It might be a little bit longer than the 15 minutes that I wanted, but I have a lot of information, and the second video won't be that long, so stay tuned for the second video.